The World Without Visas, Around the World with Valery Shanin. Travel across Turkey became the next stage of the World Without Visas project, within which Valery Shanin travels only around the countries, visa-free for Russians. On the travel across Turkey and northern Cyprus, his fellow travelers were Mainur Klemantieva from the island of Sakhalin, Mikhail Ivanov from Alma-Ata, and Marina Osipova from Kaluga. Turkey, tea and culinary delights. Third series. Present Turkish Gaziantep was initially an Armenian city. It was called simply Antep. On February 8, 1921, the Grand National Assembly of Turkey added to the name of the city the title Gaze, that means brave. Who and when has constructed the first fortress on such a favorable place from a strategic point of view, nobody knows. In the 6th century, Byzantines completed the strengthening of the fortress, which was already available by then. The next time when building of the strengthening was resumed was in 1481, but the most radical reconstruction began in 1557 by the order of the Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. The little something that can be seen today refers to that time. The local population did crafts and trading since ancient times. During the genocide of 1915, all the Armenian population was deported to the Deir ez-Zor desert on the territory of modern Syria. The markets remained and the trade goes on. However, nobody here forgets about culture and rich historical heritage. The owner of the private museum, Medusa, shows herself with pride the most valuable exhibits to tourists.
В этом зале у нас представлены различные предметы. Изделия из золота, серебра, ювелирные украшения, а также изделия из бронзы и обожженной глины. Кроме этого зала в нашем музее есть еще 4. В них представлены экспонаты, относящиеся к римской эпохе, к мусульманскому периоду и к более древним периодам 9000-летней истории города. Обратите внимание на этот детский саркофаг и фигура на нем с другой стороны. Женщина, ребенок, женщина с ребенком и орел.
Baby is birth and death is figurated in this side. And this is the little baby's tomb. This eagle and...
А с другой стороны изображение льва. Как утверждают археологи, это символ Римской империи.
When a person died, they ornament this dead person.
Когда человек умирал, его хоронили в гробнице вместе с дорогими золотыми и серебряными украшениями.
Ornamenting with gold objects and put his valuable objects because they believe that.
Клали туда и ценные предметы. Глаза и рот закрывали кусочками золота. А здесь у нас детские игрушки, которыми играли царские дети. Они относятся ко времени хеттов примерно 4000 лет назад. Этой амфоре около 3000 лет. Она относится к временам финикийцев. Ее использовали для перевозки по морю вина. А это оригинальное приспособление для отсасывания излишков грудного молока у кормящих женщин. В этом шкафу выставлены утки. С их помощью в госпиталях обычно собирают мочу у лежачих больных. Обратите внимание на этот предмет. Его сделали для царя периода римского правления 2000 лет назад.
The museum keeps a huge collection of similar original objects, not typical for regular museums. The collection is fairly small, but very rich, and it was picked with big love. It is not even a museum, but a private collection. Its objects were selected according to the general principle, more originality and singularity. The Nemrut Mountain, 2,150 meters above sea level, is not just among the most important sites of Turkey, it is the spiritual center of the country. At the top is a well-paved road. Public transportation does not go on it, but our travelers were lucky. They've stopped a passing water truck and managed to cover part of the way. Further, only by foot, higher, higher and higher. The rise is smooth but long. We are going on foot up the Mount Nemrut. We were given a short ride in the car with barrels of water, but the last kilometer we are climbing honestly with backpacks. The mountain itself is not very big. Nobody would know about it if not for the original sanctuary on top of it. A few last meters. The tomb was built in 62 BC by Kommagena's Tsar Antiochus I, Teos of the Armenian Ervands dynasty. During his entire reign, he did not leave any noticeable achievements, if any. He could have sunk into oblivion like thousands of other kings and potentates. But thanks to the tomb, he secured his fame after his death for centuries. The tomb was covered with a high sand mound. Giant statues were positioned in front of it, up to 8 and 9 meters tall. Only the heads remain of them, but they create a strong impression. The biggest and most amazing building, the altar, the gods seating in a row on top of it, with their heads lying on the bottom, at their feet. It is possible to reach the mountain top from two opposite sides, from the side of Adiyaman and from Malatya's side. Tourist groups are brought here and taken back by a single available way. There is no direct road here, but independent travelers have a great opportunity to climb the mountain on its one side and go down the other. We could have gone down the mountain on a paved road, but it seems shorter if we go straight ahead. It's no problem that it is a bit steep over here. Grape grows in the valley. Trout lives in the river. We have reached Malatya by a passing car and immediately boarded the train in Kayseri. It is 3:45 a.m. in Kayseri. The train station is close to the city center, but the travelers are just passerbys in these places. Ürgüp is considered the tourist center of Cappadocia. Residential caves and bizarre rock formations can be seen directly on the territory of the city or in its close suburbs. Restaurants serve traditional Cappadocian dishes, a blend of Turkish and Greek cuisines. Kayakapi district in the center of the old town is being restored especially for tourists. Even more ancient houses and residential caves preserved in the village of Goreme. Here, hotels get cut out in the rock too. They offer to sleep in the caves without windows on the stone beds. Goreme surroundings are covered with bizarre rock formations. Don't shoot this, catch it. My hands are busy. What's next? Wow! Lower the branches and roll down. Millions of years ago, as a result of the Erciyes volcano's eruption, all Cappadocia was covered in ashes. The soft volcanic tuff gradually disappears with the wind over the years. This is how the freestanding giant cones appeared. In the 9th to the 11th centuries, people created churches in them. Have you filmed it? Done. Super. The landscape looks strange and seems lifeless at the first glance, but soil in the ravines and valleys is fertile. There is a lot of sun. This only needs to be watered, and harvest is guaranteed. It's sweet and sour. From Goreme, the travelers are leaving to the very south of Cappadocia, to the city with a strange name for the Russian ear, Nigde, or nowhere in Russian, although, of course, it is just pronounced as Nigde. The Gyum-Yushlar monastery is one of the largest and most original cave monasteries. The monastery courtyard is entirely cut down in the rock. From it, they dug the caves on all of its sides. Inside them, they established churches and monastic cells. Apart from the two upper floors, the monastery also has two underground levels, for the monks preferring to isolate themselves from the worldly vanity and pray in complete darkness and seclusion. The monastery was founded in the 9th to the 12th centuries and was named after the name of the city it was based in. The townfolk also lived in the caves, cut down in the same rock, neighboring the monastery.
Горожане также жили в пещерах, вырубленных в той же самой скале по соседству с монастырем.
The travelers took the night bus from Cappadocia to the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. From the Turkish port of Tashudzu, ferries go to the Cyprian port of Girne, northern Cyprus. Like Abkhazia or southern Ossetia, it is an independent state recognized only by a single neighboring country. We've been driving along the beach. Let's turn to the left. Bon appetit! In the second part of October, local Cypriots do not usually swim. It is cold for them. The air, even in the middle of the day, does not get warmer than 32-35 degrees. And the seawater has already cooled down. It's not more than 26-28 degrees. The beaches are empty. Only the citizens of the northern European countries come here, who are compared to the walruses by the locals. In northern Cyprus, there are Turks and Europeans, but if somebody is missing here, it is Greeks. They all moved to the southern part of the island, but they did not sell their lands, and the state is in no hurry to requisition it. This is why there are so many vacant sandlots on this blessed island in the center of Europe. The churches abandoned by Greeks gradually deteriorate and turn into ruins. The churches that were recognized as historical or architectural monuments have fated differently. In Esentepe, for example, the church built at the time of the Crusades was converted into a mosque, and the church of Antiphonitis, set in the dense pine forest 5 kilometers from the village, became a museum. The foreigners are so kind to us, they let us sit. We could keep on walking, but it is so hot. The church of Antiphonitis used to be on the territory of the Greek Orthodox monastery founded in the 12th century. Its name can be translated as open, which is one of the epithets of Christ. The church is decorated with frescoes of the 12th to the 15th centuries. While the monastery stood abandoned, looters cut them off the walls and sold them on the antique black markets. Later, several of the stolen frescoes were returned, and the monastery was turned into a museum and is now carefully guarded. In Cyprus, the travelers have slowly shifted to a wilder lifestyle. We slept on the beaches, walked on foot, or traveled hitchhiking. Where are you all going? Look, he is afraid. I was on the other side. Hitchhiking in Cyprus is nice, but a little worse than in Turkey. There are many European drivers, and they cannot understand how to fit 4 hitchhikers into one small car. The dog is wonderful. It licked me all over. Sometimes we need to split into pairs. There is only one road. It runs along the seacoast. It is difficult to miss each other. This is hitchhiking. We have to split into pairs. The first 2 people in front, and we are catching up. The monks' hermits selected the high cliff overlooking the sea and almost half of northern Cyprus. In the days of the Byzantine Empire, the monastery of the Virgin Mary of Kantara was established here. Later, a castle or a fortress was built on its place, or even far more possible, a guard post. There was no need for a war here, and the main road of the island can be seen clearly from here. There are many deserted beaches on the northern coast, usually in the neighborhood of abandoned Greek churches. There is no one here, but the sand is covered with a thick layer of waste. It is regularly brought by the sea, and no one cleans this. We have just left. We spent the night on the beach. There's a lot of garbage there. We came to the road. There was a truck passing. We ran. A man saw us and stopped. Now we are going to Evringoia. Deep Karpaz is an administrative center, and in fact, it is the only town of the Karpaz Peninsula that occupies the northeastern tip of northern Cyprus. Only 3 kilometers from the town, there are the remains of the church ruins of the Philo Holy Monastery. The church was destroyed in 802 by Arabs, at that same time as the city of Carpathia was erased from the face of the earth. It was moved to a new location and revived under a new name, Deep Karpaz. The road first goes along the sea. So we are walking along the deserted road in the east of northern Cyprus. Then it turns to the side and we ought to walk along the shore covered with stones. Karpaz Peninsula, located in the northeastern corner of northern Cyprus, is striking by its vast deserts. The pioneers of Karpaz Peninsula, the explorers, the Cape of Andrew the Apostles, an extreme point of the peninsula. After it, the road turns to the south and runs along the eastern coast. There are no villages here too, but there are some hotels and camping sites for tourists. According to the legend, in the 1st century BC, Andrew the Apostle spent 3 days in Cyprus. The ship that he sailed on to Rome anchored by the beach to wait for favorable wind in the quiet harbor. Later, on this spot, St. Andrew's Church emerged. It is unknown when this happened exactly, but in 1003 it was visited by a pilgrim from England. The first written evidence belongs to him. It is unknown when and who built the church, so it is also unknown when and why it was abandoned. In 1855, a new temple was laid on top of the derelict ruins. It is still in operation, despite the fact that Greeks had to leave it. It's attacking. It's a wild donkey. The donkeys are considered wild and were included in the red list of endangered species, but you don't see them in the wild for some reason. There are only thorns there, while on the road they can beg tourists for some food. Beaches stretch along the entire coast of Karpas Peninsula, one better than the other. It is softer to sleep on the sand than on the stones. It only takes longer to shake it off in the morning. Golden Beach, the most popular beach of the peninsula and the widest. There are not too many people here, even during the season. Deep Karpaz is not on the beach, but it turns out we can reach there by motorboat, and then back on the traditional type of transport. The wind is nice. Salamis was founded in the 11th century BC, and around the 8th century BC, it became the capital of Cyprus. During almost 15 centuries, it was the largest and the most powerful city of Cyprus. Several times, the city was destroyed by devastating earthquakes. The residents carefully restored the buildings, but after the attacks of Arabs in 648, when the city was also badly damaged, the residents chose to move under the protection of the better fortified Famagusta. Now nobody lives here for almost 7 centuries. As in any typical Roman city, Salamis had an amphitheater, baths, gymnasium, temples, including the majestic temple of Zeus, with only a few stones remaining of it. The best construction that survived is the agora, surrounded by the columns and the amphitheater. There is only a narrow strip of sand between the ruins of Salamis, fenced with a barbed wire, and the sea. The place is quiet and calm. The old town of Famagusta, or in Turkish, Gazimagusta, surrounded on all sides by the high stone walls. According to the legend, there were 365 churches. Most of them are destroyed, but the biggest and the most valuable were rebuilt into mosques. The Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul became the Sinan Pasha Mosque at the end of the 16th century. The most revered Muslim saints and scientists were buried by its walls. The current Lala Mustafa Pasha Mosque is the former cathedral of Saint Nicholas, built in the 14th century by the model of Reims Cathedral in France. The exterior still looks a lot like a Christian cathedral, but inside it is something between Christian Gothic and Islamic asceticism. In Famagusta, as well as in Turkey, there are lokant, and in them, shorba. In this city, they love and know how to make oriental delights. A huge range of cakes, pastries and cookies are on display in the showcase. Immediately here, you can taste them with a cup of tea. The castle, which is now called the Otello Castle, was built in the 14th century. For greater reliability, it was surrounded by a moat. Leonardo da Vinci was involved in the reconstruction of the castle, who visited Famagusta in 1481. There is no historical evidence that the jealous Moor, who became the prototype of the main character in Shakespeare's play, lived here. But the castle is still called by his name, with the sole purpose to attract more tourists. The central street abuts to the gate. It was the entrance to the city from the seaside. Famagusta is surrounded by a 3-kilometer wall, fortified with 15 large towers. The walls were built under the project of Leonardo da Vinci. This is not a trivial protective structure, but a real work of engineering art. After completing the circle around northern Cyprus, the travelers returned to Girne. We slept in the informal military zone. The Greeks called this harbor town Kyrenia. The fortress construction commenced in the 10th century, and then it was repeatedly rebuilt, strengthened, and expanded. The construction turned out grand and reliable. It scares by its look alone. Nobody has ever had guts to storm it. In 1570, the garrison surrendered to the Turks without a fight. There are a few original museums at the fortress. The Museum of Shipwrecks exhibits the objects found on sunken ships, and the skeleton of a merchant ship from the time of Alexander the Great. In Luziniansky Tower, the inner entourage of a knight's castle was recreated. Kyrenia, the largest port city of northern Cyprus. Modern ferries arrive in a new port. The old one is only for yachts and cruise vessels. The marina is built up with hotels and restaurants for tourists. Back to the continent, the travelers were returning by ferry. The day was sunny, but windy. Everyone aboard the ferry, to sail in the storm.